Okay, we're convening the public meeting now. Let's start with a roll call. Madam Secretary, please.
Connie Palmer.
Here.
Peter Bragdon. Stepped out over here. Rudy Chapa.
Here.
Andrew Polis.
Here.
Ann Curry.
Here.
Alan Ford.
Here.
Susan Gary.
Here.
Joe Gagne.
Here.
Ross Carey.
Here.
Chair Lillis.
Here.
I come back to Will. Vice Chair Ralph.
Here.
President Schill.
Here.
Mary Wilcox. Here. Kurt Wilcox.
Here.
And Will Costian is joining us electronically.
Okay, we have a quorum. Let's start with approval of the March minutes for the board meeting. Is there
I'll move it.
any additions or subtractions, or is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, let's begin with the public comment section. And it's kind of a tricky situation. 3 people have signed up who intend to talk about subject matter that has been considered at this board meeting. And 4 people have signed up that want to talk about something that we haven't considered at the board meeting, which our rules don't allow, but we're going to see if we can work something out here. So let's start with, and I apologize right up front, I will not get some of the names right. David, is it Lil? I. Okay. Please come forward and introduce yourself, please. And we try to limit these comments to 3 minutes.
Exactly. I'm ready to go.
You've got your clock ready.
I've timed
Thank you.
myself.
Welcome.
Shall I?
Please.
Okay. I know that today we're coming to hopefully honor Mr. Unthank with the naming of the building. The problem I have is I've done almost a master's degree worth of thesis. I spoke to you before the naming, and the problem I have is if we're going to name the building for Mr. Unthank, it's very important that we not dishonor this good man who deserves honor. And if we're going to name the building for this man, we need to explain that Dunn Hall was denamed as a result of a false narrative. This needs to be made very clear through plaques and displays rather than what was originally intended with that he was a leader of a clan. He was never a leader of a clan. He had an honorific title for a few months as a result of some crooked fraternal order salesman. The report totally does not represent what was going on in history. I have produced a blog at https / with a double colon first, realdun.blog. Anybody can read through it. It's like a small master's thesis. I tear apart the false report that was filed. False evidence was used. For example, they totally ignored the man's life. All their evidence of his racism was on one blank form that never would have been shown to the man. In fact, this form did not exist until 1926. It's the form of a different organization. It couldn't possibly have been shown, nor would the crooked Kliegels have ever shown this. They knew that this man was a member of the Methodist Episcopal Church and that he was very, very pro-racial integration, supported minorities. They simply came to town, represented themselves as they did across the country, saying whatever it would take to get a sale. The first people they hit on, they acted very honorably, said, well, this is going to be a support for prohibition, which had just come into effect. Within a few weeks, or months, all these establishment people in town found out they'd been defrauded. As Crane, the commentator, says, they were victims of the Klan. They separated. That's the true story. There's almost no relation, and that's why Professor Dunn was honored in 1962. Had it been otherwise, had the narrative that you've been given been true, he never would have been honored in 1962. I've sent you all copies of this document. The story was absolutely ridiculous. And and if you're going to name this building for Mr. Unthank, you really need to make very clear that he was not in any way involved with this despicable smearing of the good man Frederick Dunn.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I put several months' worth of work into this.
Thank you for making the time to come by. The next speaker who has signed up is Theodora Thompson to talk about balancing the budget. Welcome, Theodora, and can you please adhere to the 3-minute guidance?
I will, before I read my 3-minute statement, a point of privilege to express thanks to Trustee Kurt Wilcox for being an inspiration to our campus community, being an agent of change, and a beacon for all of us in speaking to the issues important to classified employees. We are proud of his service to the University of Oregon. This never comes easy for me. That's so wrong. The shake of the head, that's not right. Shock, disbelief. The universal response from the campus community, the public, including those present, when I thank Governor Brown for highlighting UO Law alum Minoru Yasui's courage in her inaugural speech. With revenue challenges facing our state, I shared about the free shift meal takeaway proposal at UO. As president of SEIU 085 at UO, I'm proud to represent over 1,600 employees who serve with dignity and pride at the university and students. Food insecurity, shelter, health.
Let's see if we can solve this problem.
Try adjusting it just slightly.
Is it somebody else? Push it away from you a little bit. Okay, and we'll wait.
Okay,
There you
let's
go.
try that.
Just don't be too close to it.
Food insecurity, shelter, health care, the well-being of loved ones, our experiences.
I know a little thing about food.
Our experiences reflect the have-nots in our community.
Okay, they can't hear in the back, so.
Well, I don't know.
Get that other mic.
You want to, oh, sorry.
I'm sorry for that.
So that I'll go. Food insecurity, shelter, health care, the well-being of loved ones. Our experiences reflect the have-nots.
Don't worry, they won't take it out of your time.
In our community. $3 for a meal means nothing when you're earning over $60,000, over $100,000, over $250,000. Invisible from the public eye, I have washed dishes.
I'm sorry, we need to make sure we hear you. If you don't think you can...
Maybe we should move that one over to here. We can switch it up. Maybe those two are too close. Maybe you think you could sit over here?
Turn those off.
Jeez, these are bad. What's the hell of them working? I can't hear a word, honestly.
I can't either.
Andrew, and I think it's separate from that piece of it.
It's coming from back. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, Theodora, take it away, and don't worry about it. They won't take that out of your time.
$3 for a meal.
He's just turning it back on.
Sorry.
I
Now
can't
you
find
can
the
talk
$3.
really close to the mic, since apparently that wasn't it.
Test.
Testing.
Test. $3 for a meal means nothing when you're earning over 60,000, over 100,000, over 250,000. Invisible from the public eye, I once washed dishes in exchange for the meal that would sustain me. For shame that the cost of the shift meal is UO's opener at the bargaining table. The $3 meal change amounts to $600 to $700 pay cut for food service workers who fear to speak up lest they lose shift hours or be assigned unpopular shifts. Hobson's choice with dependent loved ones to care for the student employee balancing high tuition debt, while there's no accountability for the food waste that we give away. I'm a proud UO Double Duck alumna. We can take pride on many things here at UO. For shame we tread to take away an industry standard free shift meal. The meal takeaway conveys that UO does not care to afford to feed hardworking staff and student employees who work in food services. Balancing budgets on the back of staff who can least afford takeaways and upon student employees at UO is unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Joe Tyndall. Joe, please introduce yourself and welcome.
Hello, my name's Joe Tyndall. Renaming buildings, Halloween costume censure, and rape tribunals are only a few symptoms of a far larger problem. Increasingly, I meet U of O folks incapable of civil discourse. The script goes like this. Your student or alumnus makes a claim. I reply, I don't think that's true. They interrupt and filibuster about how it really is. They tell me I have no right to speak because I am an uninformed, racist, sexist, old, white, male Nazi bigot. Then they refuse further conversation. Are you proud that the U of O is the only top 150 school scoring 0 for its free speech support as measured by Heterodox Academy? Regarding fake news, I have $100 for the first person who can show me evidence of election hacking by Russia that is stronger than an unconfirmed claim by an unnamed source. Yet U of O students overwhelmingly and uncritically believe this nonsense. Riding a bus well away from campus, one of your saner students was relieved to talk freely about this. He feared for his safety if he dared to speak against the dominant narrative on campus. Chief Kearns told the Eugene Police Commission his two biggest concerns were homelessness and the growing likelihood of violent protest. Sadly, the U of O is primed to replicate Berkeley's insanity. What about false narratives? I hear the 1 in 5 rape culture myth often from U of O folks. That means 629 U of O rapes and 13,900 Lane County rapes in 2016. Yet Lane County Circuit Court heard only 3 sexual abuse cases for college-age and older women. The 2015 Clery Act data shows 89% of colleges had 0 rape and 0 sexual abuse reports. So why are U of O students being taught the 1 in 5 number? Do you care about the university's mission to uncover truth? Did you see University of Missouri applications and alumni donations plummet following the Melissa Click debacle? Are you aware of the 170 lawsuits tracked by Title IX for All regarding due process violations at campus rape culture kangaroo courts? Are you blind to free speech, no platforming battles at DePaul, McMaster, Yale, and elsewhere? The tide has turned against third-wave intersectional feminist social justice warriors, Antifa, and the Black Lives Matter. Grow a pair. Stop virtue signaling and oppose crybaby students and faculty before they seriously damage this school. In closing, is a tenured female professor really more oppressed than a homeless man? Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I think let me ask that let's please retain a level of civility here. Thank you. So 4 people have signed up on a subject called liberation and survival. And I think we will, while that's not consistent with our rules, we will hear from the 4 of you. Please adhere to the 3-minute rule if we could. And I think, Mr. Land, do you want to all come at once or individually? Mr. Landrose. Welcome.
For those who don't, is this on?
Should be. Speak right into it.
Hello?
Yep.
It's on. Tip it up to yourself.
Hello?
I
For those
think
who don't know me, my name is Charlie. I pay tuition at this university. That tuition was paid and bought for by the blood of my brothers and sisters in the United States military. I've been before this board before, and I addressed the CEO and board of directors here. I'm not here to plead anymore. I'm not here to beg anymore. I just have one message for the CEO and for the board of directors here. There is a student revolution coming. And when the revolution comes, there will be no place to hide anymore. Expect resistance. Thank you.
And the next speaker is Elena Calusi. Was that close?
CEO Schill, Board of Directors, good morning. So when you sent out the email announcing the outrageous 10.6% increase, you said that this was the only way that you could come up with your budget shortfall. My question is that the only way you can do it, or is that the only way you want to? Because there were people who showed up in Salem, students organized in Salem, to lobby state legislators to increase higher education budgeting. Where were all of you? You're supposed to work for us, and you don't. Raising tuition, putting that burden on students while paying yourselves outrageous salaries is unacceptable. You work for us. This is our university, and it is our job to hold you accountable for your actions. And what you are doing, raising tuition, raising your own salaries, and refusing to advocate for higher state funding is unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you. The next signee is Rio Lehman.
I want to be clear on one
Yeah.
thing. The Board of Trustees does not get paid to do this. We volunteer our time, and I don't work for anybody. Like, I am here to help support this organization, and I'm here to help support you, and none of us want to raise these tuitions, but none of us are getting paid for this. We're volunteering our time away from our families, our businesses, our lifestyles to help support this university because we care about it. So I just want to make sure that's clear. We're not getting paid to do this.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Lehman, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Like you said, you're here by choice. You're choosing to be here. You are choosing to report yourself as a steward of this university. And frankly, you have a responsibility to the students and to the workers of this university, and that trust is currently being betrayed. It's unconscionable to continue to hire overpaid admin and to pay them increasingly obscene salaries when faculty are being let go. It's unconscionable, obscene, and frankly embarrassing to the university to pay CEO Schill $660,000 a year when benefits are being taken away from student workers. You have a responsibility to student workers, and you have the power to change how they are treated. Under your watch, this year, free shift meals were taken away from student dining workers. Free shift meals have to be reinstated immediately and should cease immediately trying to take them away from our friends in SEAU and the classified staff.
Thank you. I apologize, I can't read the writing. Is it Max or May Hoots? Max, sorry. Please come forward and welcome.
I feel like some of the points that I had wanted to get across have already been said, but I just wanted to say, yeah, I understand that this board is made up of volunteers. I understand that this and the school administration is not the same thing, but I think that as sort of the major decision-making body of this institution, it reflects poorly on the judgment and on the character of the people here, that while the school is in a budget shortfall, while we are struggling to pay to keep this institution running the way that it is, not that things are being cut. There may at times be a necessity to pay people less, to fire teachers, to maybe even get rid of certain benefits for student workers, if money really is that tight. But if money really is that tight, then why is one portion of the school receiving more and more funding? Why are more administrators being hired at a higher rate? Why is that section of the school seeing raises and seeing wage increases while the rest of the school is suffering? While GTFs are, even in certain cases, just being replaced with teachers' assistants, which is lowering the quality of education that students are receiving. While while student workers who are making minimum wage working for the school that they attend so that they can afford to eat and pay for their living expenses are losing a benefit that is standard in the food service industry. I don't think anybody is saying that they don't understand that we're in tough economic times and that funding might be hard to come by, but it's the fact that everyone else is being asked to make sacrifices while one portion of the school is not. Why that portion of the school, which I think large portions of the rest of the school fail to see the need for more administrators. And if there is a need for more administrators, then it's not being articulated to us. Yeah, that's all. Thank you for hearing us.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. I think we're going to return now to our regular reports. And, oh, I'm sorry, yes. Let's consider the March minutes. The March 2017 minutes for the board. Is there?
I'll move it.
Is it a second?
Second.
Any additions, edits, contractions? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay, we're going to start with the standardized reports, and we're going to begin, as in the order we always do, with Quinn Higa, who's the outgoing ASUO president, and Amy Schenk, who's the incoming one. So,
Amy, we did hear that Amy is finishing class right now, so we're glad she didn't.
that's a
give
higher
that
priority.
Are you able to stay?
Okay.
Then yeah.
Great.
If Bill and Chris are both here.
Let's see, and I know Bill, yep. So we're going to next turn to the outgoing president of the University Senate, Bill Harbaugh, and the incoming president, Chris Sinclair. Welcome. This is the first time we've gotten you here, Chris.
That's correct.
That's right, okay. Bill, you're old news. I hate to tell you that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what has gone over the past year, and then Chris will talk about his plans for next year. So I did want to say that when I started this job, I think Chairman Willis was quoted in the Oregonian as saying that he hoped the University Senate could survive Bill Harbaugh.
And it has.
And yeah, my worry was that I might not be able to survive the University Senate. But my term's over on Wednesday, so I think I'll probably make it. The University Senate's done pretty well too, I think, and I think we've worked very well with the administration over the past year. So I want to talk a little bit about things that have gone on there, some of which you've already heard a little bit about. One would be responsible reporting. So this is a policy that was in place at the university for a long time that basically made it very difficult for faculty to have honest conversations with their students about sexual assault or sexual harassment. The policy required that the faculty, or staff for that matter, report to various administrative offices about what they heard from the students. Even if the student said, I don't want you to tell anybody about this, I just want to have a conversation about it so that I can help process it and understand it. And over about 2 years, the Senate worked to try to change that policy, and I can say that we have succeeded in doing that in a way that I think is not only going to be successful for the University of Oregon, but also I hope will become a model for other universities and a model for some other similar policies at the University of Oregon. So under the new policy, we're allowed to talk to adult students about things that have happened to them involving sexual assault or harassment. We're required to tell them that they ought to seriously consider reporting it, that we would be happy to report it for them, and we're required to give them a list of the resources that the university has available, support services for students in those situations. And I think the university now has some very extensive and well-run support student services to help students deal with sexual assaults. So that, I think, is a much better policy than most universities have. And the people in the University Senate who helped write this policy are really now in the process of taking it on the road and shopping it around to other universities. And so I think it may reflect well in the university that we've adopted this. I want to talk a little bit about student teaching evaluations. I talked a little bit about this in March. I've now put 2 of my economics department undergraduate honors students to work on this. They've scraped the university's website for all of the teaching evaluation data for all university courses for the last 7 years. I'm pretty sure this was legal, but I didn't ask. And we've also got all of the grade distributions for all those courses. And we've matched that up with data on all the faculty, their faculty ranks, how long they've been at the university, that sort of thing. My students have run this through an algorithm that takes a person's first name and decides whether they're male or female, or gives them a probability of being male or female depending on their first name. Taylor, that's a hard first name to decode. Bill's pretty easy, so I'm 97% chance that I'm male. We can then look at gender differences in the teaching evaluations using that. And so far what we found is very similar to what has been found at other universities, and that's that professors who give good grades get better teaching evaluations from the students. So there's an element of sort of tit for tat for this. You teach an easy class, give a lot of A+, you'll get good teaching evaluations from the students. That's a pretty dysfunctional reward mechanism and a dysfunctional incentive system. And so we're very interested in trying to fix that. We're also looking in these data, we haven't really got into this part yet, but we're looking for evidence of gender discrimination. So other studies have reported that women, particularly women in teaching in the sciences, their students give them systematically lower teaching evaluations, even though there's no evidence that they're worse teachers. If anything, the opposite is true. And so these are numerical scores that students are giving to the faculty. There's also evidence of what I can only describe as sexual harassment in some of these written comments that students provide. And every time I bring this up with female faculty, they tell me horror stories about things that have been written about them through the university's course evaluation process. This is, really, I think, just unacceptable. So the Senate committee we've set up a task force to try to fix this system. And since most of us on the task force are scientists, or at least social scientists, we're going to devise a system of experiments, trying out different kinds of teaching evaluations, and we'll run those over the coming year. And then we'll come up with a system that we will try to implement, which will fix some of the problems that we've found and that other universities have also documented. So that's one thing that the Senate has started doing, and is, I think, the potential for larger improvements there, because this creates such bad incentives for improving teaching. If we can fix that, I think it will fix a bad system and replace it with one that will give the correct incentives, and that I think people will respond to that. Another thing the Senate has worked on is Honors College Task Force. So there was an external review of the Honors College. At the request of Provost Coltrane, we set up a task force, and they will have a report out, I think, next week. And from what I've seen of it, it's got some very sensible recommendations for the Honors College, which is basically, if you want to grow it, you're going to need to spend money on it. And also that in general, the colleges and the departments are doing a good job running their own honors programs, and we don't want to mess with that too much. And as evidence of that, I'll just say that I had these 2 students working on the course evaluation projects. I've got 16 other honors students this year, 4 of whom are working on other university-related projects, trying to ask, for example, a question whether students who take a prerequisite course at a community college and then take the subsequent follow-up class at the University of Oregon, do they do better or worse than students who take the prerequisite at the University of Oregon? So far, all the evidence is that students are better off taking the prerequisite at the University of Oregon. So those are the kinds of projects that economics honors students can work on, and I think if you talk to other faculty, you'll find that that is one of faculty's favorite things about being faculty, is the chance to work with good students on interesting questions like that. Let's see, other things, is sort of the standard curriculum madness at the university. I think there were something like 238 new courses approved this year by the Senate's curriculum committee. That's a lot of courses. It's partly self-inflicted punishment because we are sort of reevaluating courses that have an online teaching component to make sure that we've got quality control over those. I'm sure you've all heard about online courses that don't have, they're not very rigorous, and we want to make sure that our courses are, so we're working on doing that. We've approved a bunch of new academic programs, spatial data science and technology in the geography department, an MA in language teaching studies, and we've gone along with the administration's desire to rename and reorganize the School of Architecture and Allied Arts into the College of Design, and approved a new cinema studies department. We already had a program, but now it's a department which has some organizational advantages. So I do want to say a few other things. I want to say something about the audit processes. This is a tough year for the university. We had to lay off 100 non-tenure track faculty, colleagues, people with families, and so forth. It's very difficult. You guys have approved a 10% tuition hike, which is difficult for our students. I think we can only expect people to go along with those kinds of measures if we're confident, if the university is confident that the administration is doing everything it can to control costs. And that, my understanding is that's one of the primary responsibilities of the Internal Audit Office. Now, you guys have been in charge now for 3 years. We're on our 2nd internal auditor. I'm sorry, but I've been to the audit and executive committee meetings of this group, I think almost every one of them. And I have not heard a lot of tough questions about the processes that are being used for audits or the result of those few audits that have been done so far. And I really think that when I look, for example, at Oregon State University's board, They have day-long meetings with their auditors. I'm just going to ask you to step up your game on that. So I think it would be important to trust between the faculty and the students and the administration, and we're going to need that trust. The next couple of years aren't going to be that easy. I think that's all I'll say, except for I'm glad that the second trip to the HEC was successful. I don't like the idea of raising tuition. I know that you don't either, but our job as faculty is to provide a good education for our students, and that can't be done on the cheap. That's all I have to say.
Bill, before we turn to Chris, may I ask a question? How is our big, maybe you're not the right person to answer, but how is our big project of simplifying the policies, the various university policies? I'm not trying to ruin your day.
It's going very smoothly, Chuck. It's just no problems.
No problem.
No problems at all. We get policies. We look at them.
But we're making progress, I take it.
I think 5 or 10 years we're done. Yeah.
Okay,
right
Chris,
around when the state switches back to a centralized Oregon university system, we'll finish processing.
All right. Chris, I'm sorry I took that little...
I'm happy. If anybody else has other questions, or Chris can go and you can ask us both.
All right. Well, thank you, Chair Lillis and members of the board. I want to talk just about a couple issues. One issue is this body and the relationship between the faculty and this body. First of all, I would like there to be a strong relationship between the Senate and the Board of Trustees, because I think we both have important work to do. There's obviously some important overlap between the work that you do and the work that we do, and a lot of the decisions that ultimately come out of the Senate percolate up to this board here, who's responsible for, let's say, ratifying some of these decisions. So I think it's important that we build a strong relationship between the faculty governance and the Board of Trustees here, and hopefully you support that as well. I would like to invite Chairman Lillis and perhaps some other trustees to come to one of our Senate meetings and give a brief presentation, talk about the duties that you do, how you see your obligations to the institution, to the faculty at the institution, to the students at the institution, and just to at some point, hopefully we can work that in with one of your trustee meetings. In general, the Senate meetings are Wednesday afternoons, 3 to 5. So maybe this is something that can be just tacked on to one of your meetings. But we would really like to hear from you and kind of help get the word out that we're working together. Along these lines, I want to talk a little bit about the faculty trustee, because Susan is rolling off, and we're very thankful for her service on this body. We are a little bit worried about the process of selecting a faculty trustee. The faculty completely understand that it is up to the governor, that we have no official role in the appointment of a faculty trustee. The faculty also completely understand that your interest in the university, your role is fiduciary and not representative. However, we, from the viewpoint of the faculty and from the viewpoint of the Senate, find it very important that there is a faculty trustee on this board who is respected by both the members of the board, but also by the faculty here at the university. And so we've gotten some kind of mixed messages for how this is playing out in Salem. I really have no idea of the truth of these things. But there's been told of some instances of the board trying to influence the governor's decision into the trustees that we put forward. And in some sense, anybody can say anything to the governor about these things. I can't control that. However, I would say that the level of applicants that you're going to get for these sorts of positions is going to be proportional to the respect that the process is given. And so I just kind of want to put that out there, that we put forward a kind of a ranked list of candidates. And we spent a lot of time thinking about who would be best. Susan came from the law school, which is great. But we think that maybe the next person on this board, in order for y'all to see kind of a diversity of opinion, should come from the College of Arts and Sciences, because this is 60% of the university. And I'm a professor in the College of Arts and Sciences. The kinds of teaching that we do, the kinds of things that we see are slightly different than what you see in the professional schools. And so we think that it's a good idea that maybe for the next round you have somebody from the College of Arts and Sciences on this board, so that that experience in combination with what Susan has brought to the board kind of just enriches your perspective of what faculty see. So I'm going to leave that at that, but that's just something that I wanted to bring up because there were just kind of some messages from Salem or just percolating around campus that cause some faculty to have some doubts about the process of selecting a trustee. Some of the other things that we're going to be working on going forward next year, so I can't give you a complete list because we're working with administration, with Mike, and with our new provost, Jayanth, to talk about things that we all agree between the administration and the faculty should be considered in the Senate. Probably the most important thing, and this will be a long-term thing, probably not something that I'm going to be able to come back next year and say, we've done it, is core education reform, or what you might call general education reform. Right now, there's kind of a big smorgasbord of classes that students have to pick from in order to fulfill kind of the general education component of their degree. There are stipulations on as to what kinds of classes. You have to take so many credits from social sciences, so many credits from natural sciences, et cetera, et cetera. There's various criteria depending on if you take languages or mathematics as to whether you get a BS or a BA. There is a rather complicated chart of what you have to do in order to leave here with a degree. Now, over the years, what has happened, there's been kind of a proliferation of courses, a proliferation of general ed courses. There was some impetus to do this because of the budget model. Basically, the money followed the students. So if you could open up a new 500-person gen ed class, give everybody A's, you could get 500 people's worth of money to go to your department, right? And so this kind of perverse incentive system is something that we're working on, or rather the administration is working on with Brad Shelton and, of course, Mike and Scott here. So that will be changing, but we still have kind of this gigantic smorgasbord of classes on the books, and we want to make it easier for students to get a good education, but also get a relevant education, and also to get some kind of education that is specific to this institution. What do we, as the University of Oregon, think are the important things that all students should leave with? And so we're going to be starting this process. Over the summer, we're going to come up with a task force, which is going to come up with the charge for the committee, which will start next year. But this is a committee which has been suggested we need by our accreditors. So this will be an ongoing committee, which will probably be there in perpetuity, or at least until the accreditors go away. So this is something that I just wanted to put on your radar. Finally, I wanted just to talk, and I know I've probably spent more time than I should have here. I want to talk just a little bit about the interaction between the Board of Trustees, the faculty, and the HEC. We realized in the last couple HEC meetings that perhaps the relationship between the University of Oregon and current commissioners on the HEC is maybe not as good as we would like it to be. I can't say that the decisions that they made were personal or anything like that. However, I feel like there needs to be somehow more close connection or more interaction between these two bodies so that they can see that we as the University of Oregon have specific issues, but we also offer specific benefits that other universities can't offer. And so when we go and say, well, we need additional X% for tuition increase, they need to understand that what we're offering is different than what Portland State is offering. It's different than Oregon State is offering. And I just worry a little bit that the relationship that I'm seeing is kind of starting to look like the relationship between the old OUS board and the administration previously. And I don't know how to fix that, but if there's any way that I can help, I would very much like to help. Also, I think that we need to kind of bring people from these three bodies together, the faculty, the HEC, and the Board of Trustees or the administration, because there's also some of the things that the HEC is putting forward. For instance, they've been talking about transfer let's call it a Bill of Rights, for lack of anything better, where they want basically students to be able to take 2 years at community college and then transfer seamlessly into any of the 7 publics in Oregon so that they can finish their degree in another 2 years. Right? But then let's think about this in the context of general education reform that I just talked about. Right? If you do this, you do all of your gen ed classes, or most of them at community college, and then you come here to do your major specific courses, are you really leaving with a University of Oregon degree? Right? How do we ensure that all those values that we as ducks have in us, as we as faculty here, how do we ensure that those values actually follow those students too that come on kind of a non-traditional path? Now, these requirements are coming down from the HEC, though. So if the HEC says you have to do this and the legislature signs off on it, we have to do it. And so it would be nice to have some way of us, being the faculty, perhaps plus the Board of Trustees, being part of the discussion when these are happening in Salem, so that we can say, okay, we help design whatever criteria that you're going to impose on us so that we can do a general education reform in such a way that both does help transfer students, because of course we want to help all students, but also ensures that students have come away with a true University of Oregon degree, the thing that we can provide that nobody else can provide. So I think I'll leave it at that. I could go on, but you'll probably get to hear more from me next year.
Let's see if there are any questions for either Bill or Chris. I have one. When was the last time the general education requirements were reconsidered?
So the last full revamp was in the early to mid-'90s. So that gave us the current smorgasbord approach. So it's been quite a few years. I think that the consensus of the task force on general education reform is not that we're going to go in and try to revamp all of the courses. We can't. We do not have the manpower. That's like 1,000 possible gen ed courses. But instead, I think what we're going to focus on are learning objectives and pedagogy to ensure that people that are going into these courses are getting the most, let's say, vibrant educational experience for these very general courses. That they're seeing the pedagogy that's known to work for those subjects. And so we're not going to necessarily be wholesale redevising the curriculum in terms of what you learn. What we would like to streamline is not the right word, but what we would like to make simpler from the viewpoint of students is you can select from this large body of courses. However, how you learn and how these courses kind of work with each other in order to have a narrative or an arc or a story of your general education experience, that's what we want to change. And then ultimately, perhaps years and years as time goes on, we can kind of go through and cull some of the 1,000+ courses. But for now, it's a more narrow pedagogical approach.
So are you talking about professional development for current faculty that would need to happen if you're saying the pedagogy isn't good enough to meet certain standards that you're setting on faculty? How are you going to deal with that?
So one of the members of the task force currently is Lee Rumbarger, and she runs the Teaching Engagement Enhancement Program, TEP is what we call it, which is specifically designed for professional development for teaching at the university. And right now they're running sets of, they're calling them CATES, and I don't know what CATE stands for, but basically they're kind of pilot programs for bringing together good instructors who want to work on novel pedagogy, and they can come together and talk about the pedagogy. And so they're already doing things like this. And so this is something that we would rely, at least partially, on teaching engagement program in order to inform us as faculty what are the best teaching methods, and to provide resources so that people can go there and learn these teaching methods. Some of the existing resources are the things that we're going to be leaning on.
So are you seeing this a volunteer thing or a required time, or how are, again, Lisa's saying something. I think this would be a really interesting element of the whole success, the whole raising the caliber, everything to have you report back on getting, you know, down and dirty on this one. It'd be really interesting to hear more about it as it progresses.
I would just, I don't know how this, and I hope I'm not embarrassing myself to raise this question, but in our, we met, some of us met with, most of us met with professors and people who work at the university in the last few hours. And the group I was in was making a very strong point that, you know, the drive that helps students to not spend so much money on college, which is to get through in 4 years if it's possible, is really affected by the fact that they can't get into some of these core classes. They can't get into writing 120 and writing 121. Well, if we want them to graduate in 4 years, and we have an obligation to make sure these courses are available. So when we talk about core classes, I hope you're thinking about, I hope you're really thinking about how we're going to make it practical for the number of students that we have. We want to, if you talk about saying, I want the bar to be different, maybe higher, then how do you also make it workable and sustainable for our students? So I just want to throw that in.
Okay, any other questions? Chris, I accept your invitation.
Oh, great.
Last night, we were at, I think it was last night, at Scott Coltrane's function, the wizard, as we call him, and a professor of computer science came up to me and said that he was on the recommended list from, I assume, the Senate.
Oh, yeah, Joseph Tech, probably.
Yes, Joseph. And I haven't seen the list you recommended, so I was completely caught by surprise. He's terrific, but
he would be fantastic.
So can you share that list with me? Can I see your list or of the candidates you've proposed?
I mean, I think Angela has.
Oh, Angela.
I think are you referring to the letter that they referenced?
Well, wherever you listed your proposed candidates, I don't know how you
Because
did
you
that.
referenced preferential candidates.
That's right. We just kind of came up with a ranked list, and the top choice on that list was Joseph.
Yeah, we've surveyed the Senate, and we used our own judgment too, and we wrote the governor letter. And Chris is right. Joe was the top of the list.
So will I see the list?
Angela has the full list.
Oh, okay.
Are you asking for the list or the letter? Because you have the list of the 5 that apply.
I guess I don't know that I have that list.
Okay. Well, we'll send it to you.
Okay. Well, yeah, send the list.
Okay,
please.
right.
But if you want to see you want to see it in the order that they
Yeah,
ranked
sure.
it? Yes,
So however you can do that.
Okay.
Call me up or something. That's
Okay.
all right.
Well, I'll work with Angela. I'm sure that we
Okay.
can make this happen.
All right.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right. Bill, thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to miss
Bill.
you. Chris, thank you.
I might be back. So.
What did you say?
You might be back.
So the Senate has an election next week for vice president and president-elect, and so far I'm the only candidate. I'm
It's
sorry.
a hard job.
I didn't want to tell you that.
Okay.
No, we like it. It's okay.
All right. Let's. Are we ready for Quinn and no? You're ready? Okay. Let's do you next, please. So it must be Quinn and Amy. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay.
Usually there's one more time. Hello, everyone. Good to see all of you again. My name is Quinn Haga, and I'm the former ASUO student body president. So we just kind of wrote a brief report just kind of highlighting some of our accomplishments this past year. So I will go over that now. So this past year, the ASUO has worked on 4 primary focus areas, including safety and accessibility, providing support for student organizations, improving student health services, and university policy reform. And some of our proudest accomplishments in increasing safety and accessibility have been improving campus lighting, expanding the Safe Ride and DDS services for students, creating an initiative to improve campus bars, purchasing an additional access shuttle for parking and transportation, and advocating for students in Salem in the hopes of securing additional money for the Public University Support Fund. The ASUO also worked with campus partners to create red cards, and these assist our students who may come into contact with ICE. And while these accomplishments are diverse in their impacts, they're all steps that we made in order to improve the safety of the University of Oregon. And we hope this will always remain a priority for student leaders and administration, because in order to be successful students, we need to feel that the U of O is safe and accessible for all. Student organizations are the lifeblood of the ASUO and of campus life. This past year, the ASUO has tried to connect student leaders with more resources in order to expand their capacities as student leaders. So we worked on a climate-friendly purchasing guide for organizations to use in order to be more mindful in their purchases and the impact that they make on the environment, which I guess is actually very fitting to be talking about right now. And we have also laid the foundation for next year's exec to establish a comprehensive cultural competency training program that all student leaders will have to access through the program's council meetings that are held each term. And we believe it is crucial that our student leaders are equipped to address inequity and injustices on campus and in the world. Nationally, healthcare is an ongoing conversation, and students will need to continue to access affordable healthcare through the university if political interventions continue at the federal level. So drafting and signing the Memorandum of Understanding around the University Health and Counseling and Testing Center expansion was a very important step that was taken this year by students in order to help secure some additional resources. And student officials should seek to make their voices heard as the expansion is begun so that student needs and priorities are represented in this change. Our advocacy at the state legislature for greater education around meningitis and vaccinations contributes to improving public welfare in the face of dynamic health challenges. We cannot take for granted the advancements we have made if we are to preserve access to healthcare as a right. Policy impacts everyone at the University of Oregon. As you know, changes in governing structure have created many opportunities for the university to work better for all of its members. And the ASUO executive partnered with administrators and members of the University Senate to improve, reform, and resist in some policy processes. So the dialogue around time, place, and manner we hope will continue to involve student leaders like us next year, cementing the autonomy of the ASUO in university policy, promotes shared governance, and the substantive conversations around mandatory live-on need to turn to reforming the direction and implementation of the requirement. Creating partnerships and actively representing students in this process should persist for student officials and can facilitate transparency for administration as well. In addition to these 4 core areas of focus, the ASUO has also had some other notable accomplishments that I'll go over briefly. So this spring, the ASUO held its first ever speaker series, and this was designed to spark conversation around the recent decisions made by the new administration and how they will affect students on our campus. We also held the first ever ASUO Silent Disco, which was super fun, and we partnered with the Residence Hall Association. And this was a good way for students to get together on a Thursday night and engage in healthy social activities. And we also hosted a student debt management clinic with the GTFF, which was facilitated by a national member from the American Federation of Teachers. And in light of the enormous tuition increase that we've been hearing so much about, the ASUO wanted to make sure our I-fee increase was as conservative as possible, while still continuing to support our student programming, which is obviously super important. And so we held to a 2% overall increase, which is one of the lowest increases in the past few years. And then finally, the ASUO had the incredible opportunity to plan and participate in the Investing in the Age of Climate Change event with Trustee Susan Gary. And this was actually a direct result of student activism that was led by the Divest Duo student campaign last spring. So it was really awesome to see that kind of come to fruition a year later. And the ASUO is super proud of everything that we've had the privilege of working on and achieving this past year. And striving to improve campus for all has been foundational to our time representing the student body. It's definitely an exciting time to be a Duck, and we're hopeful for the future of students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mine is
Welcome.
Not. Hi. Is this on? Hi.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Hi. That was very eloquent. So I don't have a long report. I just want to introduce myself to you all. My name's Amy Shank. I'm the incoming ASUO president. I am the ASUO president, I guess. Transitioned already. Pronouns she, her, they, them, and I'm a third-year international studies major with a focus in Arabic and political science. Just a little bit about me so that you all get to know me. So third year, I'm from Portland, Oregon. I'm one of 3 children, and I got here on the presidential scholarship, so worked my way throughout my time in high school to get good grades to ensure that I could get to a good university like University of Oregon. And this summer, I guess some plans that are coming up. Told my President Schill about this, but I'm going actually to Jordan to work with refugee groups and study Arabic this summer. So if you don't see me in town, that's where I'm at. I'll make sure to wait to you all. But I'll be back toward later August, and I'm hoping really to connect with you all, and I'll talk about that later. So yeah, I just kind of want to introduce myself. I'm excited for the new year. And so the goals that I specifically want to work on, accessibility is a huge one. Not only accessibility for students to get involved with ASUO just on the basis level, and continue the work that Quinn has done this year in getting student programs involved. But I'm really excited to get more resources here on campus more accessible, such as food security. Recently, and I'm hoping to submit a report to you all, one of our students did a senior thesis research project on food security on campus. Very enlightening to hear that a staggering number, and I don't want to say the number because I don't know if she's published the work yet, so I don't want to speak out for her and her work, but a staggering amount of students deal with food security here on campus, more so than I thought. And so what we want to really do is continue those efforts to getting a food pantry on campus, working with the one off campus right now to ensure that it could move on campus to provide just greater accessibility for students, while working with the Ducks Nest to ensure more folks are SNAP certified trainers to get more folks actually in their food stamps to register. Another thing that we're really focusing on is continuing safety efforts that Quinn had worked on, including the lighting, ensuring that continues, but also sexual violence protection here on this campus. So that's a huge issue that we see, especially continuing throughout the national field. And we just want to continue enhancing the resources for students here on this campus to know their rights in regards to sexual violence protection and prevention here on this campus. Another large focus that we want to include as well as continue in regards to safety is also work with the change with Safe Ride. So making sure that we're working on enhancing safe resources for students to get to one place to another, not only off campus but on campus as well. That's really vital. And along with all these and encapsulating is working just with you all on making sure that students, with a huge tuition increase this year, it's most detrimental to a lot of students here on this campus. And so I just want to work with collaborating as best as possible to bring a student voice to the table and to work collaboratively to come up with the best solution we can to make sure that we are not pricing out students. And this events like this will not happen next year. Again, working with you all to find the best solution on this. So those are some of my goals. I know my vice presidents, Tess Moore and Vicki Gim. They're really excited to continue working this year, and I hope they can stop by and help meet you all maybe this summer, hop on a phone call with you all. I'm hoping this summer to reach out to you all and hop on a phone call and just talk about your interests and get to know you more, and also we can hopefully have a conversation. If you're in the Eugene area, we can stop by. And I'm also really excited. We're going to host another meet and greet. I don't know if it will be brunch, but we're going to have a meet and greet with you all. And you all are more than welcome to come. We're still kind of working out logistics, but you're able to meet the student leaders here on campus. We're hoping to have some club leaders here as well, those that do a lot of work for minorities on campus, including those gender minorities, but also racial minorities and folks of color and low-income students. So that way you can meet the holistic bunch of students that are here on this campus. So I'd like to thank you for your time here today. I'm really excited to work with you all. And yeah, if you have any questions or anything, feel free to reach out. I'm going to stay here till the end when we do, I guess, the mingling portion. So I can formally introduce myself to each one of you. But yeah, I'm excited for the new year.
So are there any questions for either Quinn or Amy? And congratulations, Amy, on your
Thank
election.
you.
And congratulations on your graduation.
Thank you.
You're almost done.
Any questions for the ladies?
Just whether you're going to coordinate the meet and greet when some of us come from out of the state, and I would love to attend if that could be coordinated.
Yeah, our offices are already working together.
Yeah, we've just started touching on it. So since we just got an office a few weeks ago, we're starting to kind of come up with a way that we can best plan that over the summer. So it could be toward the beginning of the school year, but again, whatever works. We can do a doodle poll or something, whatever works best for most folks.
We did it before a football game this year, because the idea was that trustees would potentially be in town for that. But Angela, of course, will work with all of your schedules.
Great, thanks.
We'll figure out the best
we'll make sure,
The only other question I had was about the food pantry. Oh, no, go ahead. Okay, it was about the food pantry. How soon do you think there's a possibility of having that up and running? And there's some discussion that we've been having about that, and I think there might be others as well. I don't know, but I've been hearing that there's another others as well. So I was just hoping that we could maybe coordinate and maybe figure out what your timeline is.
Yeah, for sure. So we actually just, so there is a few groups on campus, and I definitely want to give a special shout out to the student group on campus, the Food Security Coalition, run by Hannah McIntosh and Ellie, I forget her last name. And they're a really great group that actually kind of fused together efforts of different students like Kiara, who did her report and on her thesis for food security. And then there's folks from the Student Sustainability Center, specifically Eric Beeler, who's been working with me heavily to come up with just kind of very concrete and realistic asks, especially for funding, not only from the ASUO, but also from the administration any way that we can. So we've actually come out with a list of those, and those we're having a meeting with next week. And so the timeline we're projecting for that to kind of accumulate around fall term to really get the wheels moving around possible funding, and then winter kind of taking to effect, maybe starting the movement, but we recognize this is a really long-term project. So along with the food pantry, providing other resources for food security. So hosting a food security event is one thing that we're going to be doing as ASUO in fall, to just let students know, hey, you can register for SNAP here at this table, which is food stamps, or here are your resources for off-campus subsidized food, and here are your resources also for possible food on campus that's cheap. And then also working with the Women's Center, which actually helps international students get to subsidized food like Winco and other off-campus sites, and they provide vans on a weekly basis. And so working with the International Student Office and the Women's Center to enhance that program as well, using Safe Ride vans. So while we recognize food pantry might be a longer-term process, if we can get really the wheels running with that, the gears turning and things moving with funding this year and providing and enhancing those other food security projects on campus, I think it can be a really, really beneficial year for students here on this campus to get access to food.
Thank you.
Kurt, you had a question?
Well, not a question. I just wanted to thank Quinn for all your efforts this past year. Your entire administration, which Amy, and many others. I've appreciated working with you as part of the board, but also through the Senate. And thank you very much for your service.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and congratulations on your last meeting. Yeah, congrats. Susan as well.
Any other questions for the ladies? Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you. Bye.
I'll see you.
We look forward to working with you, Amy.
Thank you.
Professor Coltrane, this is your last opportunity, is it not?
So thanks. I want to thank you all last night. That was a great send-off. I really appreciate it, and thank you very much again. So I want to talk just about a couple things that we're kind of coming to closure now at the end of the academic year, and the first is searches. The faculty searches, as you well know, we've made a concerted effort to grow the tenure-related faculty, and we have authorized 64 searches during this academic year. We also made offers to and had accepted 10 additional offers of faculty through either a partner program or a supplemental hire program, hiring 2 out of a pool. So that means we have hired 53 faculty, and as Brad mentioned earlier, in any one year we have approximately 40 separations, retirements, or people leaving. So we're on track to have a net increase in faculty. We were on track like this last year, and it turns out we had more retirements than anticipated, so we won't know until we do an official census later, but it looks like we'll grow something in the order of 15 faculty. Of those hires, it was the most diverse hiring year we've ever had. 22 of 53 hires, or 42%, were to underrepresented faculty groups, including 10 Asian or Asian American and 7 African or African American faculty members. So among our tenure-related faculty, that doubles the number of African American faculty on campus. So that was a huge success. 24 of 53 hires were of women, 45%. So those 2 groups together for underrepresented, particularly field-specific underrepresentation, so women in science and a few other fields, we had a majority, 51% of our hires increase our diversity. I have numbers on where the hiring was made. As Brad mentioned again, when we had a huge enrollment growth starting in 2008, we did hiring in areas other than the natural sciences, so we've been in catch-up mode the last few years, and so we did the largest number of hires in the natural sciences, 17, and we also did some successful hiring in cluster areas, and we'll continue some of those. So we'll be able to report back at the either fall or winter meeting with the final numbers. And that's a good segue into the institutional hiring plan for next year. As Brad let you know, we have a new procedure. We utilized a faculty committee as well as a dean's council for reviewing them. This was a shift in process and a shift in culture to some extent. It allowed us to have a more holistic focus on some of our strategic and important goals. We had the president's priorities that he's announced, the specific provost office priorities that we asked people to address in their plans for hiring were enhancing academic quality, promoting interdisciplinary study, supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion, increasing external support through funded research, and growing graduate education, particularly PhD programs. So this mapped on very well to our strategic plan. But in addition to that, each dean had their own strategic priorities that they would filter up proposals from the various units and programs. And we found that this process of bringing people together at the table really created some synergies. They got to learn more about each other's proposals. This is something that would have happened individually with a dean in a regular meeting with the provost before. And if they had the budget for it, they could just go ahead whether they talked to the provost or not. So this is really pulling back that authority, as Brad talked about. What we noticed from doing this process is that there were some natural groupings. The largest was in computational science, data science of all types, big data, across disciplines, across colleges. And so that's something that we will have something on the order of 12 to 14 searches next year that have that as a component to it, and that'll complement quite nicely our high-performance computing. Environmental humanities, global cultures, study the social inequality, transportation and urbanization. Other areas kind of coalesced around interdisciplinary themes. We had a lot of people addressing also the night campus. And that's probably will work its way more fundamentally into this process as we go forward. The plan also reflects the university's commitment to establish clusters. We will still be hiring next year in energy and sustainable materials, genome function, neuron to mines, and volcanology. So altogether, there were 67 searches approved for next year. These are now posted and available. You've got some materials in your packet, and they're on the Provost website. As the job descriptions become available, these will be linked. So particularly where the synergistic areas where we're going to run ads together and things like that, we'll be able to link to those. There are 14 searches continued from this year that we did not make hires in. I don't like to call them failed searches. They're only successful when you hire the right person, and if there isn't the right person in the pool, you really want to renew it, and so we're doing that. There are 8 current offers out now that we're waiting that we might reduce that number if those people come on board. So, as I mentioned this morning, we're seeking feedback on how the process worked, what we can do to refine it, and Giant Motivar will be leading that and looking at what worked and what didn't. So again, next year's searches are spread across the schools and colleges, similar level of funding that we're expecting next year, a little bit less explicit emphasis on the target of opportunity mechanism, but still being open to career hires where there's a partner that comes, and sometimes more than one hire out of the pool if we have exceptional quality. A couple of the things that are just coming to fruition right now, we had a year of self-study and internal program review last year for the Cinema Studies program. This is a program that was started in 2010. It has over 300 majors. The degrees are awarded in the College of Arts and Sciences, but it was a 3-college collaborative effort, and the program, we had an MOU, governed it for 5 years. At the end of that 5-year period, they needed a new MOU, so we've been in discussions about this now for about a year and a half, and during this academic year, we really began serious collaboration with the Senate and with the folks, the affiliated faculty. So it's a program that, although it has 300 majors, had only 1.5 faculty attributed to it, and they were all part-time, so they had a home someplace else. So all the faculty running the program were housed elsewhere. And so what we went through was a process of what would work for you to stabilize the enrollment planning, the curriculum development, the administration for the department. The Academic Council, which is a Senate committee, voted to approve departmentalization, and the Senate passed a resolution affirming that. The affiliated faculty within the program, so they have their own bylaws just like a department because they're already degree granting. They grant degrees only at the undergraduate level at this point in time. They voted overwhelmingly to become a department in the College of Arts and Sciences. So the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences wrote a proposal to that effect, and we are now executing that MOU. Individual faculty, we've had meetings with endless meetings. The Associate Deans, Susan Anderson, Karen Ford, did a great job in terms of pulling together all the various competing needs. In the end, we will, at the beginning of next fall, be moving 3 faculty from English, 2.6 faculty from the School of Journalism and Communication, and 1 faculty from Korean from East Asian Languages and Literatures into the Department of Cinema Studies. And in some cases, we'll be replacing those lines in the units because that leaves gaps in their curriculum for media studies in SOJC and in Korean. But these are all, broadly speaking, cinema studies scholars trained in a very interdisciplinary tradition. So what we aimed for here was to maintain the interdisciplinarity of the course offerings where people could take courses, students from various colleges could track in and out, do double majors, that sort of thing. We were mostly successful. There was some turf issues that arose, and there were some people who wanted to protect the majors in other programs. And so we worked through it. We got the MOU done, so that will be launching. Starting July 1, they will be a department. So similar to the School of Architecture and Allied Arts becoming a College of Design, this is a program of cinema studies becoming a department of cinema studies. No new degrees, no new curriculum at this point, just a different internal organizational structure. One other that Senate President Harbaugh referred to was an Honors College Task Force. We negotiated with the Senate, so this was a Senate committee. They nominated folks, a really strong committee, one of the best task force I have worked with since my time here. They made a number of proposals. Last year, we also had a program review for the Honors College. That was an external program review, and there was a series of recommendations. But they really only looked at the Honors College per se and not all the other Honors College offerings across campus. So this task force is looking at Latin honors, that top 10%, 5%, or 2% who get, magna cum laude, summa cum laude, and those who are given on the basis of grade point average. Then there's majors in a department, and there's majors in a college. So they looked at kind of the lay of the land. All those are fruitful. They're making recommendations about how to standardize. Are the proportions right? Are we giving about the right amount? Turns out we're not that generous. We're maybe generous in a few pockets where we want to look at standardization. They do signal, as Bill said, that we'll need to invest in that as we grow. If we want to grow the Honors College, I gave them the charge at first of should we grow the Honors College, and then I reformed that to say how should we grow the Honors College, because we think that it's a very important thing to do just to keep the best and the brightest coming to the University of Oregon. Last item to talk about very briefly, the Portland developments in the December board meeting. You asked many questions about our support to Portland students, and we unearthed some issues. We now have completed the process of promoting Linda Favero to Assistant Dean of Students and Career Services for UO Portland students. She spent the prior 8 years as the Program Director of Alumni Career Services for UO Portland. During the past 6 months, she has established a Portland Student Council with 12 members, 2 from each academic program, and they're working together to ensure an inclusive and welcoming student community. She created a student lounge so students have space together to be together across disciplines. She secured a position on the ASUO board for better student representation. She organized several social and community service events for students, including a bingo night. About 75 of the 400 students attended, so they're creating more community there. I think that's a good development. Launched a monthly Around the O Portland Student Edition. If you haven't seen it, take a look. It's really geared toward our Portland programs. It's a really nice addition to our communication strategy. Linda supports students in crises. That was one of the questions that came forward. What do you do when students up there have problems? Do we have the same level of student services? Well, what she's done is work with various student issues and does career advising as well, so putting that together in a nice way. And Jane Gordon, who's the Vice Provost for Portland, has done a great job putting a governance structure, and you heard from her a little bit more, and I'm sure we'll hear from her again. So we're excited to see what she's going to accomplish in the future. I think we're on the right track. And finally, thank you. Thank you for giving me opportunities to serve the university in various ways. The first was a bit of a shock, but that was a great year. The next 2 years working with Mike have just been phenomenal. It's been really a pleasure to work with.
So can you take a question or two?
Yes.
Since it's our last chance.
Yeah.
Anything for Scott? If not, thank you.
Thank
you,
Scott.
Thank you,
Scott.
Okay, President Schill.
Okay, so I don't have much in my president's report today because most is going to be covered or has been covered already. Basically, I want to just thank a few people as I begin. Bill and Chris It's been great working with you this year. Okay, as I was saying, yes, Bill, Chris, thank you. It's been, I agree with you, it's been a good year, and Bill, either you're the incoming or you're the outgoing. I said it's been a good year working together. I've enjoyed it, and I think that you've done. You mentioned some of the specific policies, such as the responsible reporter. I also policy, which I think actually you were actually for many of us know that it got in the Chronicle of Higher Education. So it is a model that other universities may end up using. I also appreciate your support for the tuition increase. It's obviously not unanimously popular, but we appreciate it, and we appreciate your support in that. And we also, one way that the Senate doesn't get appropriate, perhaps credit, is the work that your members do in our committee structure. So, for example, you're on a number of committees. Chris was on the Provost Search Committee. We have the Senate Budget Committee helping in the ad hoc, our budget, where we're looking at our ad hoc budget committee, looking at cuts and the like. And so we're very, very grateful for the participation of the Senate in that respect. Quinn and Amy, are you still here?
Quinn is. Amy's outside.
Oh, Amy's outside. Well, Quinn, thank you. You've been spectacular, not just... You know, sometimes it's easy to be ASUO president. Sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes it takes courage. Natalie, you too. I don't have very good eyesight, but I just saw you there. And you two stepped up, and you took a view that wasn't unanimously popular with the students here. And what that did is it showed your character, and I'm very, very proud that you're alumni of the school, and I know that everyone here expects marvelous, wonderful, extraordinary things from you in life, and we're all going to be there both rooting you on, and if you ever need a hand, we're all there for you. Thank you very much. And of course, the wizard, Scott. I said a lot of things yesterday. I don't think I need to repeat them all now. You know how I feel, and everybody else does. You have been, you were the right man at the right time, and we are eternally grateful, and we expect that to see you quite often sitting in your bench. I hope you went over and looked at it afterward, and not just sitting in your bench, but visiting with us and talking with us, and remaining good friends. Thank you. Now, I do have a few business items to talk about, or I don't know, I guess I was called the CEO, so maybe it's appropriate to call them business items, but basically items of importance. So I should mention the HEC meeting. I think that a lot of you read about it and heard about it. So we were all pretty surprised when the HEC turned down our request for tuition exceeding 5%. We hadn't expected it. I don't think anyone expected it. And so it was not something we had planned for. On the other hand, due to a great team effort, and by team, I've mentioned the Senate, I've mentioned the ASUO, and the administrators here, we were able to provide the commissioners at the HEC with the information that they needed to then be able to reconsider and vote an increase of 10.6%. And, we learned some things from the process. We learned both something about the HEC. We learned about maybe our process, which we had thought was much more inclusionary and inclusive than we had ever done in the past. We could still improve it and make sure that we were getting the message out to everybody. And we're going to take those lessons into account next year as we move forward. But, at the end of the day, I think it's nothing to celebrate. I mean, we're better off with it than without the increase, or else we wouldn't have proceeded both with the Board of Trustees and the HEC. But there's no celebration in a 10.6% tuition increase. There's just no celebration. And what we will celebrate is if the state legislature has the good sense to appropriate the money necessary to allow us to bring that tuition increase down to 5%. And we're all going to work as hard as we can. Hans and Libby are every day in Salem. I'm in Salem virtually every week. The past couple of weeks, it seemed like almost every day. And, we will eventually call on some of you to help us also in that effort. But that's the moment to celebrate, when the state recognizes that it has an obligation to support higher education, when it recognizes that what we do here is the key to a successful state. And so we will hold off the celebration until then. The other thing that we're going to hold off until after the legislative session is over is, I think that our experience with the HEC has been an important experience, because I think we need to think about what has happened in the state and how the new governance structure is working with regard to the HEC. And I think that there'll be time for that, for us to understand, what happened, whether it was the appropriate thing, and how we move forward with our other universities. Because remember, we weren't alone in this. And so there'll be plenty of time for that after the legislative session. Speaking of the legislative session, they've been in session since February 1. They're going to conclude, they have to conclude by July 10th. So the work is ongoing. As many of you know, The final weeks of the session are going to be spent negotiating budgets, cost containment initiatives, possibly new revenue. All of this means that we need to be very active in Salem, representing our interests and the interests of all higher education, and indeed of education in general, since that is the key to progress in the state. We continue to work jointly with our other public universities. Indeed, Ed Ray was here yesterday, and we had a meeting to talk about some of these issues. We have a joint ask into the legislature for $100 million above and beyond what the governor put in her recommended budget that would take the Public University Support Fund to $767.3 million. Some of you may wonder what's our share of that if we get the $100 million. I don't really know. The formulas work in very odd ways and almost never to our benefit, but in any event, it'll be something, and it will be very useful, and we think with that amount, we've made a commitment with that amount that we will reduce the tuition increase down to 5%. We also have two specific asks that are separate from our other universities, although endorsed by the other universities. The first is a $44 million capital request for bonds that are general obligation bonds for a classroom and faculty office building. And then the second is $100 million for the night campus. On this one, I want to thank a ton of supporters. We've gotten great support from editorial boards around the state, from our legislators, from labor unions, from our faculty, from the city of Eugene, from the counties, and including Lane County. Basically, anybody you talk about this project who understands it's vital for the future of the Willamette Valley and vital for the state of Oregon. And we're hoping that our legislators also understand and in their wisdom vote the $100 million in bond funds for the night campus. Speaking of the night campus, we're making great progress. Let me start on the physical side of the night campus. As of yesterday, I received an email from Kevin that we are the proud owners of all of the land that we need to build the night campus. Kevin and Mike Harwood and their teams respectively worked to amass that property, and it went in record speed. I won't say every owner it would have been their number one choice to sell to us, but we didn't have to take the property by eminent domain in the end, and we reached agreements with everyone. So we are now the proud owners of a Domino's. I don't know if I ever would have said that in my life. We are allowing the various units that are the Evergreen Domino's to stay in business, and I think we're not even charging them rent during this period until we're ready for the property, which won't be probably until, I would say, January, which is what we're looking at. But we moved much more quickly than we expected. Patrick is in Salem also almost every day, and every day that he's not in Salem, he's working with the architects or someone else. And I've seen some conceptual drawings for the night campus, and they're really great ideas, and they play off nicely against the mill race. And we're really looking forward to seeing more schematic drawings in July. And so very, very exciting. And the night campus is moving along in lots of other ways. We initially, as you know, we and OHSU have been talking about various ways in which the night campus can move us forward in both of our schools. And so we planned like a meeting of some academics who are both academics in the Night Cancer Center in OHSU and at the University of Oregon. We planned for it to be about 10 people just to talk about ways in which we could collaborate. We ended up about a month ago with 80 people. President Robertson and I were both there. The respective vice presidents of research were there. The faculty were buzzing. They were all, you put a group of scientists together, you give them some idea there may be some money someplace, and they have 20 million experiments that they're thinking of, and all things I don't understand. And it was really wonderful. And they were talking, they were not only talking about science, they were talking about, well, where are they going to stay when they're in Eugene? How are they going to get back and forth? Should we have shuttles? So it's the sort of thing that we all want, and which is to take the two academic jewels in the state of Oregon, combine them, not legally combine them, but combine them in joint research efforts to make each of the universities stronger and make the state of Oregon better. And so we're just totally excited. In Mike Andreessen's words, we're over the moon on that. Our director, there he is back there, our director search has launched. Some of you may have seen the ad in the New York Times. We have gotten some really interesting, people are excited, they're buzzing about it, and I think we will have a great search for the director. And we have a search committee. Brian Drucker from the Knight Cancer Center is on the search committee, again, emphasizing the importance of linkages with OHSU. So that's it on the Knight campus. I wanted to just bring you up to date. Every meeting I talk a little bit about where we are on the Black Student Task Force and their demands. And I'm not going to go into depth. I normally do a laundry list. I'm just going to mention a couple. And Scott mentioned one of them. And, it's a real achievement. I don't know whether everyone picked up on it. We doubled the number of African American faculty in 1 year. Now, if you take a relatively small number, that's not an impossible goal, but we did it, right? We hired 7 people, which is more than we've ever hired. They're really excellent scholars. And we're really delighted, and we want to continue making progress to increase diversity of all types on our faculty. That's important. As all of you know, I announced maybe 6 months ago, 5-6 months ago, that I was committed to the Black Cultural Center, and that we were going to move forward with planning it. We had a lead gift of $250,000, which was going to help us with architectural drawings, and then we would do fundraising for the rest. We are at about $1.3 million in fundraising for the Knight, not for the Knight campus, but for the Black Cultural Center, and we're hoping to secure another $200,000 gift very shortly. So we're moving along, and I'm sorry that they're not here. I'm going to actually see them later on in the week because some of them are seniors and they're leaving, and we're very grateful to them both for being so steadfast, for bringing these issues to us in the first place, and also I think have established a model that any university in the country would be envious of in terms of how we've worked with our students. We saw protests, we saw nastiness, we saw some violence in parts of the United States over these issues. For us, ever since the first protest, it's been mutual respect, and it's been achievement, and it's been progress. And what that shows you is that through mutual respect, through hard work, you can make progress on any issue. Hardest issues, the easiest issues. And we're very grateful to them. We're going to be sad to see them leave because I have to say a number of them I've become quite close to. And but hopefully they remain, obviously, forever part of the Duck family. So just mention our diversity action plans. As all of you know, last winter we asked all of our academic units and all of our administrative units to give us some ideas, create diversity action plans, a set of initiatives for each area that would include a set of metrics to hold them accountable. At last count, which I think is the last count, We have 32 separate plans which have been submitted, 10 by administrative units, 19 by academic units, 3 joint academic, I don't know what the joint is it joint academic units?
They are being reviewed, like IS, for example, is considered academic and administrative. Night campus.
Okay, so we have 2 working groups that are now sifting through these, analyzing these, with the idea being that, we have 32 separate plans. We don't want 32 separate, overlapping, redundant things happening. So we're trying to figure out what are those things that are common that we might do centrally, what are those really good ideas, and then what are some of the things we might be wanting to fund centrally. So that process is ongoing now. We should, I would imagine in the fall, we'll have a final set of lists that we can share with you, and the plans will be up and available. So with that, I think I am done with bringing you up to date on at least the most important things. We're not going to talk about the budget since we're talking about the budget. Jamie's talked about it already in various places. We will continue to talk about it. So if anybody has any questions, happy to answer anything you have to throw. Peter?
Just make a comment on the state funding issue again, since it's obviously a critical thing, and I mentioned it last time, but I'm still optimistic that there will be new investment. I think the key thing for people to understand is you have a lot of people who are supportive of getting new investment in higher ed. In various parts of the community, the business community, there are a number of people who are willing to have higher taxes, with a condition being that more money is going into this kind of thing. So I think a good case is being made. I checked my email on it during the disruption while they were asking for it. I tried to work on it, but I just think there are a lot of people working on it, so don't give up. Don't give up hope.
We're not giving up. We're continuing to go for it. We have 5 more weeks, and so we'll continue. And if you have any suggestions, either for Hans or Libby or for any of us,
suggestions from them.
From them, I would love that. We'll do that too.
Just 2 things. One, if Salem doesn't approve the amount, but does it have the ability to approve less than that amount? In other words, is it a yes or no on our request for them to put more money in so we can lower tuition and other things, or do they have an ability to fiddle with those numbers that we've provided?
Are you saying can they come up with a number in between 0 and 100?
Right, because you were talking about a potential of reduction in the tuition 5%. You're talking about other investment that we're hoping for the university. Can they change those numbers themselves and come up with something less than what we're asking?
They have total flexibility.
Yeah. So if they come up with 20, so what you have enacted for next year in terms of tuition plan, and the HEC has approved, is every $20 million that goes into the PUSF at one point comes down in the tuition. So they can come up with any number in between that, and so
or in excess of, yeah.
Or in excess of 100.
Well, that would be nice.
And we won't go the other way, but that's also possible, which we hope doesn't happen.
Then the second question I had is, we heard some testimony from the students today about the student money that people are getting, or food they're getting when they're working in these student jobs. And I benefited from that myself when I was going here and working at the student union. And I was wondering, how much money do we actually save in cutting that? And you said you can ask me anything, so I'm asking you. But if it's not something you know off the top of your head, of course I would understand. And I'm just thinking about the timing. We just have so much going on coming up in the fall with, required freshman year, increase, and we don't know what's going to happen until July. I just hoping there's nothing else that's it suddenly pops up that's going to make it tougher on the students who are struggling already. And.
Well, I do too, and there is. But one thing I've learned in my 2 years is that you never know what's going to happen tomorrow, and so I hope there's nothing else that becomes a burden. With regard to the food, I think Roger's not here right now, and he could tell you. Jamie, do you know the number?
No, gosh, I don't know the number off the top of my head. The one thing I just wanted to make folks aware of, including you, is I believe there's a related issue for staff, and that's part of labor negotiations. So on the staff side of this question as well, I just want to put out there, I know we have a session tomorrow on labor, but I just want to let you know that.
You're giving me the
I mean,
warning
is this under-
sign.
is this
So I'm
being
getting
negotiated now?
There's a
an
student-
orange signal to talk
Basically,
So this is being to discuss tomorrow?
There is the question I think you're asking, which came up in public testimony, which I don't know the answer to because it was dealt with by housing, and food service deals with the students, which is not related to the staff. And we can pull data and get information from them and ask them to bring that forward. I just want to make clear, because I know we have to be careful with when we're in labor negotiations about what's discussed outside of labor negotiations, that I believe there's a related issue with staff as well.
Can we talk about it tomorrow, or is that still going to be a funny time?
I think in the session that's set up for talking about the labor negotiations, we can talk about absolutely everything that's related to the labor negotiations. I just wanted to clarify for everybody, there's two separate issues
So I'm just
here.
taking the student side. I think what Roger would say, although you can ask him yourself, is I think what he would say, certainly part of the decision making here was about equity, that you had students who were basically not paying for their meals, and that the cost of that was being passed on to other students in their fees. And it didn't seem like that was a reasonable way of handling it. That they were paid the same amount other student workers were paid who were not in the food services, and the extra added expense was being passed through to other students in fees. I'm not going to, I can't really articulate all the arguments, but I think that's probably what he would say if he were here.
Okay, well, I look forward to more discussions about it tomorrow.
I do have a question for Mike, but if I could offer some facts, I guess I would say, on this situation, since I won't be in the discussion tomorrow. Student workers and classified workers in food service for years and years have been given a free meal on the shift that they work. Housing made a decision last year, both on the equity issue and in terms of cost, that they wanted to at least cover the cost of those meals. So last year, last fall, I guess it was, they implemented this policy for students. So students have, since the fall, been paying, if they take the meal, $3 for each meal that they pay. The attempt was made to do that with classified employees as well, and classified folks that know there's a bargaining process. Talk to us when you get into bargaining. So that's currently on the table in negotiations with classified employees. But I think the issue the students were raising is we all already have this significant issue of food insecurity for lots of students. Many students work in the food service jobs because it helps them. They get a meal.
Right.
Or they used to get a meal.
It was the best meal I'd get.
And now that
when I was in school. It was the best meal I'd get when I was in school.
But your initial question of how much money is saved, I don't know. Theodora offered that,
I'd love to know.
Paying $3 a meal for the classified folks amounts to probably about $600 or $700 over the year.
Mm-hmm.
So presumably it's a similar amount for the student.
Per person?
Per person.
Per person.
And there's an effort in one of the efforts that Roger's trying to make, and is actually successfully, is to reduce the cost, to present as a way of increasing accessibility and affordability. He's tried to create a way to have different priced housing and dining options. So actually 2,000 rooms now are under $10,000. I think they're $9,000, which is lower than they've been in the past, to try to create a whole array of options. So they're under a lot of pressure to do that, and to try to keep their costs down, to make us accessible to students at any range of income, partly because we have next year we're requiring all freshmen to live on campus. And so we wanted to make the beds as cheap as we possibly could.
Right, and just to kind of, because in our meeting at lunch, we met with a number of, some of our experts were people who dealt with Among them were people who dealt with the Pell Grant and with Pathway Oregon and all of that. And one of them, who I can give you contact information for if you'd like, who works on campus with this, said that for the Pathway students, when they come in freshman year and they have their tuition paid for, even the increase in tuition, whatever it turns out to be, no matter how much, that even if they max out their loans, they're still not going to be able to afford freshman year at the $10,000 rate for living in the dorms that they're required to do. So if their parents can't afford anything, my parents couldn't afford a cent, they could not live in the dorm. In other words, under this scenario, I didn't qualify. There wasn't Pathway Oregon when I was here, but the tuition wasn't what it was. I wouldn't have been able to come to the University of Oregon under this scenario, even with Pathway Oregon, because there wasn't money for me to live on campus freshman year. So then the question then becomes, if that's true, if it's true that there are students who maybe we would want on campus, we really want to make sure that they have this opportunity. There's a gap. There's a gap, and whatever that gap is, I wonder if there's some consideration. And of course, we're not talking about the majority of students. We're talking about a minority of students, but we want to be compassionate. So I was wondering if there were some. I know that there are some rules under some conditions. Some students don't have to live freshman year on campus. There's some, very few, but they can get a waiver. And I don't know what.
I think your parents live within 25
yeah,
miles.
Something. And I don't know whether the answer is that, because there's a lot of the reason why we have them living on campus is because it's good for them. It's good for their academic achievement. It's good for their ability to graduate in 4 years. It's good for so many great things. So we don't want to pull that away, but I don't know what that gap is and how we want to think about that. But this scenario is, it's amazing. The idea that you can have your tuition paid for if you come here and you're an Oregonian, it's amazing. But still, what this person said in our meeting today is that 40 Pathway students left in the fall and winter term. At least 20 of them, about 20 of them, I think he said, he didn't have the exact numbers, left because they couldn't afford the housing. So there's some kind of drop ball here, and they're for in-state students. And there are not that many of them, but golly, if there are not that many of them, then we should be able to fix that.
And there is a pretty big project underway to understand exactly who those students are and how big that gap is, and to understand it for the first-year student and the second-year student and the third and fourth year. So I think we're gathering a lot of, I'm not, but the university's gathering a lot of data. So are there other questions for Mike?
I did have a question for Mike. And it's a side issue, but you were talking about the conceptual drawings for the night campus and having the buildings fit in with the mill race. When Mike Harwood spoke to us in Portland, he talked about his experience renovating a similar situation at his previous school. I'm just curious, are we doing anything direct about working on the mill race as part of the night campus, or with the other?
I think it's too early. It's way too early to say what we're doing.
I think it'd be wonderful.
And in September, at the September meeting, you'll get there'll be a chunk of time dedicated to
talk about
that entire capital project.
Okay.
And
I just don't want that to get lost in the process. That seemed like a great opportunity for us and for the community. So,
included in by that entire project, we mean the community, various community relationships, and potentially even a couple other things.
I don't think people will be rowing down the mill race, though, under any set of circumstances. But hopefully, who knows?
That would be great.
That would be great. You used to row, right?
Gondola race.
Let me just ask a question before we. Are there any others for Mike? Something Angela and I have been talking about that I'm interested in how it sounds to you is we have a lot of new deans, and I've participated in a couple of in-depth, so think of a couple of hour conversation with a couple of trustees and a dean, where unstructured, where the dean can, reflect on anything they want to. And I have found those to be extraordinarily useful. So I was proposing to Angela that we should try to find a way where we can, as a group of trustees, we could probably do it half and half for the board and have some of these meetings with some of these deans. It's just, it provides an insight into the guts of the organization that I find really useful. So does that sound like interesting?
It sounds great. In fact, maybe we should handle it like we did that one time Angela, when we were, after our Friday meeting, we stay for an hour or two. In other words, have it, I would love to do it with the entire board. I think that if that's possible.
Yeah,
we're trying to figure that out.
We'll talk about the logistics of it, and I'll be reaching
great
out
idea,
to you
Chuck.
for your annual board evaluate, like your self-assessment of yourselves, but also, and our office is coming out to you next week. And so I'll add a couple questions along those lines about, in addition to deans, perhaps, I mean, I see Danica sitting back there, but, as an example, having some of those conversations with, folks leading the major initiatives that you guys have individually or as a group expressed the most interest. So that'll all be on yours.
My personal experience has been that we benefit from having more of us rather than fewer in each meeting. So if we could get half the board at a time with each of the deans, I mean, one dean at a time, the focus being on that dean's issues in college and, whatever. I just think it's a great learning opportunity for all of us. So if that sounds like it's
in total compliance with public meetings laws.
Right.
Obviously. I'm not interested in going to jail. That's not that important.
But we'll push it. We'll get close to the edge.
I would love to not limit it just to the new deans, because...
all deans. Okay. All deans, yeah. Okay. Any other business for today?
It would be interesting if we could have at those lunch meetings, which again, just excellent conversation at the lunch meeting today. And I know it's probably more difficult to get students because of their schedules, but we've done that in the past, and I don't think we've had students in any of the lunch meetings.
June. We've heard from them in June and September are difficult because finals and end of year, and then they're not. I mean, June and September, and they're not here in September, so they're.
But it's worth trying to.
Yeah, if we could.
Yeah.
And it'd be particularly interesting if we could get some of the pathway students into.
Well, good. Mention it to them when you see them in a few minutes. Yeah. Although I guess these are the graduating ones. Yeah, so
that'll be good.
Well,
I think this was originally, I was wondering if any of the other board members felt that there was any usefulness to being able to, report back in a more formal way or more public way about some of the things we've learned in some of these lunch meetings. I mean, I've been trying to give information to people or bring it up if there's something that's interesting I discover, but I was wondering if we... I'm curious what everybody else is discovering.
So there is a difficulty around that in the public meetings law, and I'm not trying to be difficult here, but the public meetings law, in part, is meant to ensure that anything the board has discussed is noticed to the public, so that if the public has an interest in hearing that topic, they have enough advance notice to be here. So what we find works well, and you guys don't see a lot of this, but what happens is after those meetings, some groups take notes, some individuals take notes. We obviously distribute those, but then if there are certain issues that seem to bubble up in multiple conversations or that are new or very interesting, then that actually helps feed the topics you see on your agendas. And so then we can actually notice it and invite the right people and have a conversation. So it gets a little tricky, and it's really just about making sure that we don't engage in a discussion here, that you all don't engage in a discussion that wasn't properly noticed.
Yeah, I've tried to do this in the meetings I've gone to put together some notes and send it to Angela, and then it get distributed. If people could do that, and if someone could do that from each of the groups, I would find it very helpful to hear what was said.
Yeah, and it's very helpful to us because then if there's something in there that's a specific issue, we can triage and send it to the provost's office or whomever if it's not a board level item or discussion or something that actually can be really easily remedied. We feed those out to various
Okay, we will either recess or adjourn. We'll recess.
It's ice cream time.
Until tomorrow morning.
Oh,
It
is it
is
really?
ice cream time at Allen Hall.